So when we left off on Friday, we were talking about breaking mixed costs into the fixed and variable components. We talked about scatter graph, which was just doing what? Remember that? That was plotting, right? And trying to run a line through it. It's just like an eyeball thing. I'm not sure why they still talk about it. I don't really know anybody that's plotting with a ruler and drawing a line through anything. Linear regression, which is very easy to use in Excel. You plot in your points for a series of time points, right? So January, February, March, or week 1, week 2, week 3, week 4, right? Your activity driver, and then the dollar amount. Activity driver is probably a new word. We've been talking before about units or volume. But the example I gave you on Friday, we used miles, didn't we? Because we were talking about the cost of a fleet. So the volume or the driver of the cost was number of miles driven. So it's not just raw units of production, it's whatever drives the cost. That's called an activity driver. So scatter graph, linear regression, and then we practiced using the high-low method. Let me see, before we jump into the problems, if I've got one more example of numbers to do mixed. Okay, I don't right in front of me, so give me a second, we'll go through that. Okay, so let's go ahead and just jump into the homework. I think we did 2.2 and 2.3, which 2.3 wasn't even on here. So we're on 2-4, looking at fixed and variable cost behavior, bottom of page 54. Espresso Express operates a number of coffee stands in busy suburban malls. The fixed weekly expense of a coffee stand is $1,200, and the variable cost per cup of coffee served is 22 cents. And they want you to fill in the following table with your estimates of total costs and cost per cup of coffee at the indicated levels of activity, and round off the cost to the nearest tenth of a cent. So assuming 2,000 cups, 2,100 cups, and 2,200 cups, how much did you think the total costs were? And this is really just, can you use your calculator? So one thing I don't like about this problem is that the fixed cost is becoming part of the I mean, you've got to absorb your fixed costs at some point, but that $1,200 is there even if you sell no cups of coffee, right? So if you sold 1 cup of coffee, would it be fair to say that that cost $1,200 to produce? I mean, not really. I mean, I really shy away from doing a fixed cost per unit analysis. You have to absorb this at some point in order to generate a profit, right? But because it remains static regardless of how many you sell, I'm a little leery about really incorporating that in a per unit basis. How can somebody articulate for me the difference between the behaviors of fixed costs and variable costs? Monica?
Fixed costs set per month, usually like the rent of the space, and the variable cost is based on the amount of the cost based on the number of units.
So the difference is fixed costs behave in a way that they don't change based on volume. Variable costs remain the same what? Per unit and change based on quantity. And now we're going to get a little more sophisticated, and instead of just saying quantity based on activity driver. Right? Okay, 2-6. Traditional and contribution margin format income statements. So contribution margin is a new concept. Figure out how I want to do this. What is contribution margin? What minus what? sales price minus variable costs give us contribution margin. And these are all your variable costs, not just your manufacturing costs. So like, what are some examples again of variable manufacturing costs? I'm sorry? Okay, so specifically, we talked about 3 kinds of manufacturing costs, right? Direct materials are always variable, aren't they? Direct labor. What kind of overhead? All of it? Like my depreciation on my factory equipment, is that variable or fixed? That's fixed. So specifically, my variable overhead. Like the per kilowatt charge for the electricity in the plant. The indirect materials. But you can also have fixed overhead, can't you? Like the depreciation on the plant. Okay, what other kinds of variable costs are there other than manufacturing? So non-manufacturing, right? Like, go ahead, Jess. Right, like selling expenses, like commissions, for example. You can have variable administrative costs, like a per order processing fee. So if you take the selling price of your product and subtract all your variable costs, you're going to come to something called contribution margin. What does that have to cover still? Yeah, you've still got to cover your fixed costs. And once you've done that, hopefully what you're going to have left is what? Your income. And again, these are all your fixed costs. I don't really have room to rewrite it, but it's your manufacturing, your fixed manufacturing overhead, and your fixed selling and administrative. Is that going to yield you a different number than net income in a traditional P&L? No, it's a different what? Format. Why do I have this whole new format? Well, but so how's it useful?
Shows where everything went.
Yeah, but how's it useful? I mean, this takes a lot of manipulation from the traditional P&L format, doesn't it? Why am I doing it?
So you can figure out how much of your profit is covering your fixed expenses.
Close.
Or your
You can
sales.
figure out, for each unit I sell, what do I have, obviously, to cover first off? My variable, right? For every additional unit I sell, I'm going to generate that much more variable cost, correct? That's how variable costs behave. They remain the same per unit, but increase with volume. So every time I sell one more unit, straight off the get-go, I've got to cover the variable costs associated with that. And that's going to generate an amount that's going to do what? Help cover these, and then generate this. So this is obviously a very key number that you've got to be cognizant of. And as we get more sophisticated, obviously you're going to sell more than one product. Your question is, do I want to focus on my super high turnover, low contribution margin products, or my low turnover, high contribution margin products? Or do I want to find a mix in there? So this is kind of introducing us to the concept of how we're strategizing about product mix, whether we want to build out a line or retract a line. My point is that this guy contribution margin format income statement doesn't yield you anything different as far as a bottom line. The bottom line is going to always be the same. It's just a way of breaking it down. And this should also help you to understand why, with a mixed cost, where would that go? What do we have to do to our mixed costs? You got to break them into the fixed and variable components. How come? Because you can't get the contribution margin unless you've done that. Okay, so, and then should we just really quickly review what a traditional format statement looks like? So a traditional P&L, anybody? Sales minus COGS gives you gross profit or gross margin, certainly can call it either.
And then on the other side, you have your sales and administration.
So then all of your, I think we'll just call them operating expenses. Is going to take you down to,
Net income.
yeah, and this is really simplified. There's a couple other things that I'm sure you learned in financial accounting that are down here, like your other and your extraordinaries, but for simple purposes. So just to again reinforce, those two numbers are going to be exactly the same. We just have a different format, don't we? Okay, so back to this guy. Where am I? 2.6. Cherokee Inc. is a merchandiser. They sold 20,000 units at $30 a pop. Selling expense per unit's $4. Admin expense per unit's $2. So those are both examples, obviously, of variable costs. We have fixed selling. What would be an example of a fixed selling expense? Yeah, sure, great. Yeah, you've got an advertising contract. Or you've got a sales manager that you pay X to. Fixed admin. Then I have beginning merchandise inventory, ending merchandise inventory, and inventory purchased. They want a traditional income statement, and then they want a contribution format statement. So I think we did forget one little quick thing in here at the review. What's my model for cost of goods sold again?
Beginning inventory, less purchases, minus ending inventory.
Good. Excellent. Beginning inventory plus purchases gives you,
Costs of goods available.
excellent. Cost of goods available for sale, right? And then whatever you still have in your warehouse at the end of the period, your ending inventory. So obviously the difference is what you sold. Okay? Just as a refresher. So glad to have the smart board back. Okay. So this is just filling out what the model we just had up on the board, isn't it? 20,000 units at $30 a pop. Cost of goods sold, beginning balance plus purchases minus ending inventory gives me gross profit or gross margin. Now, don't forget to do this because we're focusing so much in managerial on splitting our variable and our fixed. But in the old-fashioned traditional format, you've got to add my point is, I think I'll keep the pen away from it, but you've got to add the variable to the fixed. right? So there's a variable component to your selling expenses and the fixed component. And those all just get lumped together in your old traditional P&L, right? So always ask yourself that. I can tell you that's something that will catch students. And then same with admin. So net operating income, 250. Any questions there? I see a lot of you writing. Are you taking notes or are you correcting your work? Okay. Anybody struggle with this? No? Okay. Then on our contribution margin format, just what we had up, sales minus all of our variable expenses. Oh, I see. Okay. Huh. But then I don't really want that there. What is that look like? Oh. Maybe I just won't touch it. Cost of goods sold is by nature variable, right? So the more it remains the same per unit, changes in total. Selling expenses variable, admin expenses variable, and then we've got our two sets of fixed expenses. This is a little simpler. Well, I guess this is a merchandiser. So what's their business? What do they do? They buy finished goods and then mark them up and resell them, right? What we're going to be working with mostly are manufacturers. So just to give you a little heads up, our cost of goods sold is going to be a little bit different. Can I go back? Instead of being beginning inventory plus purchases, we're a manufacturer now. So what's it going to be? Beginning inventory plus, yes, cost of goods manufactured. I've got to figure out what it costs to produce the goods that I'm reselling. So everything's going to look exactly the same. And I guess you also do need to specify finished goods inventory. Why am I specifying finished goods? What other kinds of inventory do I have? Work in process and raw materials, exactly. So I've got three kinds of inventories with my manufacturing company. So whenever we talk about inventory in a manufacturing environment, you've got to be real specific. You're talking about your raw materials, talking about your work in process, or are you talking about your finished goods? So I know I'm throwing a lot of things at you. We're going to talk about all this again and again, but the more times you hear it, the better off you are. So I'm just kind of introducing some of this. All right, did anybody have any questions on 2-6? All righty, 2-11, we had a chance to play with high-low. So here we have data relating to units shipped and total shipping expense. And it's been assembled by Archer Company. They're a wholesaler of large custom-built air conditioning units for commercial buildings. And it gives you data for what, 7 months? And how many units they shipped and their total shipping expense. First off, not a trick question, is a shipping expense a period or a product cost? It's a period cost. What was our cutoff? Once it's done what? Really, once it's gone through that final quality control, quality assurance? Because we had an example, I think, last week where we have packaging costs, and that was what? No, that was period. that's not really the differentiation. I mean, I agree with what you just said, but you've got to have, and it might not be the same in every single company, but you've got to have a point where you say the costs incurred in manufacturing the product have culminated. Everything else now is going to go straight to my P&L as a period cost. And in our minds in here, because they don't tell you every single problem, I think we're just going to make that QC, QA our cutoff period. So packaging, shipping, all that is going to be what? Period cost. Okay, so this is the period cost. First off, I want somebody to prove to me, I want you all to prove to me actually, why these costs are mixed. How are you going to do that? How are you going to prove that these shipping costs are mixed? Because that's the first thing you're going to have to do.
Well, you draw the line through that.
Well, it's not, I'm sorry, say that again, please, I'm sorry. It doesn't start at 0. Okay, so if I'm putting a line through here, you're saying it doesn't start at 0. If it did start at 0, what would it be?
Variable.
A variable cost. Excellent, you made that a lot easier than I was planning on. I was planning on going through the math and saying, and I mean, you can actually eyeball this, it's $1,800 in January divided by 3 units shipped is about $600 each, right? So if it was purely variable, I'd be able to go to February and say 2,300 divided by 6. Well, obviously that's not 600, right? So it's not purely variable. Does everyone catch what I just did? If it was purely variable, you'd be able to go down that whole line of costs, divide by the number of units, and it'd be the same every month, wouldn't it? But I could just eyeball the first 2 months and say that's not right. And I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Sherry? Yeah. Gosh, it has been a while. She said, I can eyeball this and see that the line doesn't cross at the point of origin at 0. Therefore, it has to be mixed. There's a fixed component and a variable component. So they plotted these in, what they want us to do there. And it says, is there an approximate linear relationship between the shipping expense and the number of units shipped? Is there?
Yes.
Clearly. It's called I can't even remember, line of least resistance or something. How do you draw it through the points and get as close to each of the points as you can?
Where you take the beginning.
What's it called?
The least squares line.
Least squares line. What did I say?
Line of least resistance. It was
Linear
close.
regression.
Stats was about 40 years ago for me, I got to be honest. Okay, so yes, there is an approximate linear relationship. Number 2, using the high-low method, estimate the cost formula for shipping expense. And make sure, estimate it, draw a straight line through the high and low data points shown in the scatter graph. Make sure your line intersects the y-axis. Okay, so let's go do this over here, just for a kind of a review. What is the formula for high-low?
Y equals
I think it's something minus something over something minus something.
y2 minus y1 over divided by 2 minus
Is the 2 supposed to be there or down below?
down below
y2 minus y1.
divided by x2 minus x1.
Okay. And what's really important is what is the y's and the x's.
Your points.
Dollar over volume, isn't it? So you're going to pick your high point, your low point. And if we go do that here, I think what? June's high and July's low. So 2,700 minus 1,200 divided by, so 1,500 divided by 6 equals 250. What is that 250? It's my M, but if I'm sitting in a board meeting, that's not probably going to be helpful. It's,
That's the origination point of your line.
no, the origination point of my line is this guy, Jess. Which is what? That's my fixed cost.
The other one's your variable cost per unit.
This line is my,
Variable cost.
this line is my total cost. And this in here is the what? That's the variable, right? So my 250 is in fact my M. But in accounting lingo, or in lingo that makes sense for management decisions, that's my variable cost for each air conditioner I ship, right? And then we've also got some fixed costs that we're going to find. I think they wanted us, and again, I don't think I can draw on here. Sometimes you can and sometimes you can't. But I'm going to pull, let's see, what did they say to put the line through the highest and the lowest?
Cross the line.
So what does it cross at, like 900? 700? Did everyone get around 700? Okay. How would you prove that mathematically then? Yeah, you would do your y equals mx plus b. Oh, why sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. But I'm so happy to have it back. I'm just going to be patient. If you were going to say this in accounting lingo, what does this mean as far as cost relationship? Total cost. And in this example, we're talking about what exactly? We're talking about shipping costs. So let's just translate this to what we're doing here so everybody makes sure they can take that algebraic line equation. So total shipping costs equal variable cost per unit, which is the M, right? Times number of units, which is the X, plus fixed shipping costs, yeah? So pick a point and put the numbers in. I would say let's see. Okay, let's just finish this. So let's just pick a point. So 1,800, right? So we're going to solve for X, which is fixed costs. So it's 1,050, right? Is that what you guys got? If that's correct, it should hold true to each point, yeah? So go do April for me and prove that this line works in April. Oh, it doesn't. You know what? I think they only took the time to make the line relevant in the high and the low line. Go try June. Huh?
Where does the 1,800 come from?
Wasn't that the total cost in
Yes.
January?
Total cost, okay.
I don't think these lines work.
Figure it
They
out.
don't.
Okay, that's not a good problem.
Because
The whole point of this is the line works. I won't give you one where the lines are all, because, I'm sorry.
I want to see why that wouldn't work.
Well, it's because they didn't take the time to work the numbers out for each point. I mean, it's just math. So either it does work, or it doesn't in this problem, but it will work in the real world in a mixed cost. Okay, so what did they do with this then?
Well, it does
They
work for
were
June.
trying to.
It works for June.
Yeah, there's like 3 of them.
So what they did is they gave you other amounts and you were supposed to compare.
Okay, so we did all that, right? And then they took,
They got 700.
well, I know because they took a different month than I did, and that's, the line's not the same every month, is it? So I guess, they must have, oh, I see. So it does work out to $700 for the high and the low. Is that correct? But not for the other 5 months. And I worked one of the other months, so I came to 1,050. Okay. That's not going to happen in A, the real world, or B, a test. The line's got to stay the same. Did that confuse everybody, or are you with me?
I was confused when I was trying to do it, but
I'm sure. Joey? Go ahead.
Would it be the same as long as the point stays within the line?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
I kept thinking I was doing something wrong.
I'm sure you did. I would have too. It was quite confusing. Then what do they want us to do? High-low estimate of fixed cost is 210 lower than the estimate.
I did not understand that one.
I don't understand that either. Really, all you have to do, you guys, is take the high point and the low point and do the change in dollars over the change in volume, pull out the variable cost per unit, and make sure that it fits on 2 or 3 of the different points in time. And the whole purpose of doing that is so that you can do what? You can go back here to do what we started the whole class with, right? My variable is 250 per unit shipped, and my fixed is whatever that number ended up being, 700. That's the whole reason we're doing it. I don't care about all that other stuff, really. Sure.
I mean, I read it over and over, but even I don't actually understand the least squares regression.
So the least squares regression method is exactly what Jess was saying, where you've got that scatter graph and you draw the line in. And I think if memory serves, it's called a t-test, where if the line's been drawn as close to each of the points as possible, when you square the difference between the line and each of the points, it's going to come to the smallest possible number, and that means that line fits as tight as it can between the points. It's stats. You don't need to know it. Don't stress on it. High-low.
Calculate that out for a test.
No, God, no.
I took stats last semester.
Yeah, it is horrible. And we've got a least regressions function in Excel, where you just go put in the points and then do one of those little FX functions. So, yeah, no. Old days, absolutely had to calculate it. Why would we do that anymore? I wouldn't do it anymore. Okay. On 2-12, we're in New South Wales, Australia. We have a factory building about 10 years old, and they've rented out a small annex attached to the rear of the building. And they've received rental income of $30,000 per year on the space. And the renter's lease will expire soon. Rather than renewing the lease, the company has decided to use the space itself to manufacture a new product. Direct materials for the new product are going to be $80 a unit. Okay, so they go through and tell us all these costs. And what they want us to do is to go ahead and list the different costs associated with the new product decision down the extreme left, and then put an X under each of the headings that describes that cost to help management take a look at it to make a decision. Now, I don't think that, I know I haven't talked about opportunity or sunk costs, so let me do that really quickly. I'm sure you read about it in the book. So what's a definition of an opportunity cost, or what is an opportunity cost?
It's like if you decide if you're going to go to school, if you're going to go to work, if you choose to go to work and you're losing out on whatever that education could have given you, if you choose to go to school, you're losing out on that work.
Yeah, you're losing out on your salary. So opportunity cost, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You give up to get something else.
Yeah, it's the loss of a benefit when you pursue another option, right? It's the loss of benefit A because you chose another option. So you've got to weigh that in. Financial decisions, right? And there's also a lot of times, and it gets a little wonky for accountants when we start talking about non-quantifiable things and subjective things. But do you make decisions even in the accounting world purely on quantitative data? I mean, heck no. You might look at a product line and all the data might indicate that you should divest yourself of that product line. But it's what gets customers in the door, right? So you're not going to do that. It's not, quantitatively you probably should, but qualitatively you understand the intangibles of it. So that's not an example of an opportunity cost, but an opportunity cost oftentimes isn't directly quantifiable. In the example of lost salary, it would be. In the example of I choose to work and not go to school, could you put a number to that decision? No, because you don't know, am I going to get through the program, or what kind of job am I going to get, et cetera, et cetera. So it's lots of times sort of an amorphous thing to acknowledge and have part of the discussion, but may or may not be able to put it down on paper. And then a sunk cost. What's the definition of a sunk cost?
Something that's already been spent in the past and that can't affect the future.
Yeah, so do we think about sunk costs when we make decisions?
I've heard you say ignore them because they're just not.
It's really hard for people to do. I bought a clunker, and now it's like, do I sell it? Do I trade it? Do I put more money into it? Is it relevant what you paid for it in any of your future decisions? I mean, it feels relevant, but it's not. You've already purchased the clunker or the piece of crap machine or signed a 1-year employment contract with the gal that's not going to work out. Those are sunk costs. They're not part of future decisions. Emotionally and psychologically, we don't really like to set those aside, but we have to. It's the same thing that happens to people in the stock market when the stock market starts to plummet. Right? I got to sell it. Your cost in that investment is already sunk. That is not relevant to future decisions.
Is there any way, like, insure against that?
You can hedge, you mean in the market?
Yeah, well,
Oh, sure. In the market, you buy derivatives and puts and calls and to help, hedge your gains and losses. Absolutely. Take a finance class. That's pretty intriguing stuff. Okay. What is this doing now? Huh.
Just minimize it.
There. Okay. So let's just go through these. Let's just go around. Jess, can you read the first one and tell me what you thought? So we're just kind of reading the facts.
The first expense to check rental cost will be $500 per month. Direct materials cost for the new product. Total $80 per unit.
Okay.
I just listed that as a direct materials cost.
So you're supposed to put X's everywhere it pertains. So direct materials are
Like your raw
variable.
ingredients to make whatever it is you're going to make.
Absolutely. So it's a variable cost. It's direct materials. And I think that's the only thing that it fits in the categories. The first one that we missed was I'm no longer leasing my space. So that's lost rental income, isn't it? And that's a what? It's an opportunity cost to making this decision. Is that relevant when you're looking at taking that space and using it to manufacture a product? Sure, you had 30 grand a year under a lease coming in the door, and that's going to be gone. So it's obviously a critical part. Absolutely. Yeah, you've got to cover that first and foremost. Okay, Joe, rental cost of the warehouse, $500 a month. Okay, so is that a variable or a fixed cost, do you think, to rent the warehouse every month? It's got to be fixed, right? Okay. Well, that gets a little tricky. I mean, if it's month to month, it's still a set amount regardless of volume. So that's going to be like a micro fixed cost because it's not for a long period of time, but it's still fixed. Now, is that a period cost or a product cost? The rental cost of the warehouse. It's a period cost. Good. Let's see, Jake, what's the next one? Jake or Jacob?
Either one.
Okay. What is the next one?
You put in rental,
Yes.
what would that be?
Yeah,
Wouldn't it would be a fixed cost, I would assume.
absolutely.
And then, I was gonna go to 50. I guess since it's a fixed cost, it can't be manufacturing overhead.
Really?
Or can it still be? I put it in that it is, but think about it.
I'm really glad that you said that because we went over this and this is I don't know why this is kind of a fall down area for students.
Well, it's for the,
Overhead can be what? Variable or fixed. In this example right here, what is it again that we're talking about?
it's rental of new equipment.
Rental of equipment to manufacture, right? I got to pay whatever, $4,000 a month to rent the piece of equipment to stamp the metal. That is a fixed manufacturing overhead cost. It's a fixed product cost. Right? So it's fixed and product.
Yeah, but how can that,
Go ahead.
I'm struggling with that one because say 1 month it's 4,000 and then the rental company the next month decides, oh, I'm going to raise it $500, so now next month's $4,500.
So you're probably not going to be renting a piece of capital equipment that has a fluctuating lease. Normally when you go into
So this would
something,
be a long-term rental or a lease?
probably at least a year. Usually when you rent capital assets, it's at least a year. But who was just giving the example of what were you asking, Joe, about the 500 and you said, yeah, month to month. So you've got discretionary fixed costs that can kind of have these micro chunks, and then you've got really the long-term stuff. So that gets a little bit above our scope. Let's just, for our purposes right now, we will talk about these, but for our purposes right now, let's just think of our fixed costs as pretty solid over the relevant range until our volume gets, once that equipment's at capacity, what are we going to have to do? We're going to have to go get another piece of equipment, right? All right. Sherry.
On the direct labor.
Yeah.
Variable costs and direct.
Good. Yep. Okay, Tirsa?
Depreciation and maintenance, please, and we're gonna have fixed costs and manufacturing overhead. And then I don't know, but I was thinking some costs.
So why is it a sunk cost? It is, but you have to know why. You've already bought it. You already own that space, don't you? You've already purchased it. That's absolutely irrelevant to your decision what to do with the space, the money that you've put into it, right?
So would all depreciation be sunk cost?
Well, anything that you own, the cost of that equipment, yeah, which really is that's what depreciation is cost allocation. So, good question. Is all depreciation a sunk cost?
What if there's?
Yeah, sure. If you purchased it, sure it is. Sure it is. You can't, sure it is, unless there's some sort of,
But what if?
yeah. No, yeah, I think I would say sure it is.
But what if your depreciation, like your business, startup business, you can only take X number of years of depreciation?
What do you mean? For startup costs, you mean?
Well, yeah, say, like, if you have your office, you, say you're using a space in your mansion for an office, that you can only use depreciation for X number of years.
No, 39.5 for an office and home.
Okay.
But like with your vehicle and you're depreciating that, eventually your depreciation cancels out what you paid.
Well, depreciation on vehicles is really tricky because the IRS really limits the amount you can take, so that's sort of an exception. Okay, we're kind of getting over our scale here. I would agree with Sherry, yes. Depreciation is almost always, because I hate to say always and never. Marriage counselors tell you that. Never say always and never. Yeah. Okay. Mel?
Was it the advertising cost?
Yes.
Your advertising cost of $50,000 per year, and put a fixed cost on selling and all that.
Yep. It's fixed, and it's a S&A, so it goes straight to your profit and loss statement. Yep.
Supervisor salary of $1,500 per month would be a fixed cost and product cost.
It is a product cost, and specifically,
Manufacturing.
it is manufacturing overhead, and we even know what to call that. It's the supervisor. What's that an example of? Good, indirect labor. Right? So indirect labor and indirect material are both elements of variable manufacturing overhead, right? Okay, let me just pop through these last ones. So then we had electricity for the machines at $1.20 per what, kilowatt or something? Or per unit. So that's obviously variable and product. Yeah, manufacturing overhead, product cost, yep. Variable manufacturing overhead. Shipping cost is a period cost, it's variable, goes right to your P&L. Return on investment, what are they talking about here? These investments are presently, okay, to provide funds, I'm going to have to liquidate some investments, and they're presently giving me an ROI. So that's going to be a what? Yeah, I'm going to give up that benefit in order to invest in this process. Okay, so for Friday, gosh, already Friday? Crazy. I love that 4-day work week. 2-23 is due. You're going to do the high-low method, and you're going to do a contribution format income statement. And honestly, if I were you, and so what I'm going to hopefully do with this now is shut it down, post it to YouTube, and then I'll put the link on Moodle so that you should be able to go in there and watch it. And hopefully that's magically going to happen by like 2 this afternoon. But this is your contribution margin format P&L. Don't miss the fact that it's manufacturing and non-manufacturing for both the variable and the fixed. And then also for Wednesday, if you could have, or Wednesday, for Friday, I'm going to start on chapter 3. I don't know if you like to read first and then listen to me talk and then go read again, but I'm going to start on chapter 3 as well. We won't spend a whole ton of time on 2-23, but it will be graded. It's worth 10 points. Okay, thank you.